The PG-02 is a 3.7 Japanese hydrofoil, bringing both high firepower and high mobility to the table. Before I start, I'd like to thank Lincoln from my Discord for getting this ship from me. I couldn't have gotten this review done without the help. The PG-02 is a Sparviero class hydrofoil, which was originally designed by Italy. Japan licensed the design and built 3 ships, but replaced the Italian 76mm Otto Melara gun with a 20mm JM61 cannon. The Japanese versions of the Sparviero were launched from 1992 to 1994 and served until 2008 to 2010. The PG-02 only has a single weapon, the JM61 Vulcan rotary cannon. This gun has an insanely high rate of fire and damage output, easily beating out most weapon systems of ships it faces. It only has 3,000 rounds and overheats quite quickly, but the player does have some choice in how much of a problem these will be. The JM61 cannon has 2 fire rate settings, 450 RPM with the autocannon modification enabled, or 3000 RPM with it disabled. While this does slow down the overheating of the cannon, it actually means that you'll let out less rounds before it overheats. When at 450 RPM, the cannon will overheat after 83 rounds. When at 3000 RPM, the gun will overheat after 229 rounds. I would recommend disabling the autocannon modification to get the gun firing at 3000 RPM, as it has a much higher damage per second while also letting out more shells before overheating. You'll simply have to keep a close eye on the overheating gauge. For belts, the JM61 cannon gets a choice of 3 kinds: a belt with 2/3 HE and 1/3 AP, a belt with 2/3 AP and 1/3 HE, and a belt of pure APDS. Despite the APDS belt actually having less penetration than the AP shells, they deal more damage per shot, so I would recommend the APDS belt over the other 2. You can only carry one belt at once, so whichever one you choose is the one you'll wind up using against all targets. The PG-02 gets a radar, which is incredibly helpful against aircraft. Simply lock onto a target, hit Alt and F while scoped in, and you'll get an aiming reticle for the JM61 cannon. You'll need to do this to actually fight off aircraft, as the PG-02 has no secondary weapons. At least, ones that would be considered actual weapons. For some reason, the Mark 36 Decoy System is a secondary weapon, despite being a set of smoke grenades. These come with no key binding by default, so you'll have to bind smoke grenade to something in the controls menu. These smoke grenades have a high air burst, meaning they protect against long-range enemies rather than close-range ones. The PG-02 also gets ESS smoke, leaving a trail behind the ship, which is much more helpful for making an escape against close targets. For survivability, the PG-02 is pretty bad. It only has 11 crew and no armor, along with a thin hull and superstructure. The only upside is that due to the hydrofoil lifting the ship out of water, it can be more difficult to aim at than standard ships, but this will only keep an enemy from hitting their first or second barrage. When it comes to mobility, the PG-02 is superb. With a top speed of 96 km per hour and surprisingly tight turning for a hydrofoil, the PG-02 is easily one of the most mobile ships in the game. The high firepower and high mobility of the PG-02 paired with the low survivability put it into one of 2 playstyles. You can play it as a high mobility attack ship, rushing enemies and overwhelming them with the main cannon. It also works as a sneaky ship, using the mobility to get into unseen spots, coming to a stop, and then suddenly killing ships with a burst of high damage 20mm fire. The main issue the PG-02 faces is matchups against destroyers. They're resistant to 20mm fire while also being able to one-shot the PG-02 with their main weaponry. It's best to avoid destroyers if you can. If this can't be done, disabling their guns at close range is the best way to handle them. You can also use the APDS shells to destroy minor ammo racks, though this can be difficult due to most destroyers having the size and armor to stop 20mm shells before they impact their ammunition. As a premium, the PG-02 comes with all modifications unlocked. Just don't forget to remove the autocannon mod. The best crew skills are leadership, crew interchangeability, fire prevention, and ship control. For grinding, the PG-02 works pretty well at getting through the low tiers of Japan. The ship can grind through all ships up to the destroyers without penalties, but it's pretty slow for grinding higher tier ships like cruisers. At $20, it's worth picking up if you're looking for a pretty strong ship to get through the lower tier Japanese ships. Thanks again to Lincoln for getting me this ship, it's pretty interesting and a fun one to play. And thanks to you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.